The Donetsk front line is facing one of its most critical tests since the war began. The latest reports from the Russian Ministry of Defense confirm that control of 8 settlements has passed to Russian forces. However, the reality pointed out by military analysts and sources on the ground is much deeper than the color changes on the map. The images you are currently watching are raw reality seeping out from the hot contact points at the heart of Donetsk. The Ukrainian armed forces are not merely defending against numerical superiority in this region, they are executing a professional attrition strategy to slow the advance of the invading forces and inflict heavy costs. It is a fact that Russia has recently gained control of strategic points such as Kucherovka and Rivne. However, the Ukrainian army's active defense doctrine in these regions is causing unexpected losses for Russian infantry and armored units. When precision munitions from the West are combined with Ukraine's local field knowledge, Russia's every meter of advance comes at a high cost. Particularly in the industrial areas of Donetsk, Ukrainian sniper units and anti-tank teams are directly targeting Russia's logistical lines, limiting their operational capabilities. This is not merely a defense of territory, it is an extremely planned and professional military stance aimed at breaking the enemy's motivation to advance. The enormous loss figures announced by Russia, over 26,000 armored vehicles and hundreds of air defense systems, demonstrate how grueling the war has been for both sides. Ukraine is reshaping modern warfare on the ground by transforming the skies into a control mechanism with over 100,000 UAVs. Yes, some settlements may have been tactically evacuated, however, the Ukrainian General Staff's main objective here is to protect its units and catch the Russian army at its logistically weakest points. Every skirmish on the Donetsk front demonstrates that Ukraine's resistance capacity remains intact and that Russia's military prestige is being seriously tested on the ground. This tactical superiority is evident in every thicket and industrial facility deep within Donetsk. Ukraine's defense units are demonstrating a professional maneuvering capability that, rather than static waiting, constantly harasses the enemy, cuts supply lines and forces the Russian army to spread out over a wide area, thereby dividing its strength. This phase of the war is shaped not only by who has more ammunition, but by who uses the terrain more intelligently. While defending its own territory, Ukraine is turning every hill and every village into an irreversible point of attrition for the invading forces, particularly in the open terrain between Kurakhove and Pokrovsk. Ukraine's armored hunter teams and UAV operators are acting in coordination to paralyze Russia's mechanized attacks at their very outset. The resistance in these areas is not merely a physical obstacle. It is also a show of will that disrupts the strategic calculations of the Russian military command. Every position on the ground has become a bastion of Ukraine's commitment to protecting its sovereignty and the freedom of its people. The combination of technological capabilities and courage on the ground demonstrates to the world how a defense can remain unshakable against a numerically superior force. Especially at critical junctions where strategic supply routes intersect, Ukraine's special operations teams, known as shadow units, take over when darkness falls. This professional doctrine, which targets Russian supply convoys and temporary ammunition depots with pinpoint accuracy, not only depletes the ammunition of Russian soldiers on the front lines but also shatters their will to fight. In this struggle to protect its territorial integrity, Ukraine has turned every street into an unpredictable risk zone for the occupying forces. This is not merely a defense of territory, it is a comprehensive art of resistance in the name of protecting Ukraine's national identity and future. In particular, footage recorded over the past 48 hours clearly demonstrates the devastating impact of this determination on the battlefield. We are witnessing how a large column of armored vehicles that Russia attempted to push towards the front line has been reduced to a pile of scrap metal in the open fields of Donetsk by Ukraine's precision strike drones and Javelin teams. FPV drones gliding through the air pinpoint the weak spots of even the most advanced Russian tanks with surgical precision, while Ukrainian anti-tank units lying in wait on the ground give the invading forces no breathing space. Burning T-90 tanks and destroyed BMP wrecks are the most tangible evidence of how the Russian army's numerical superiority strategy shattered against Donetsk's formidable defensive wall. Ukraine's synchronized attacks, carried out both from the air with kamikaze drones and on the ground with mobile artillery systems, are forcing Russian military units to abandon their positions, suffering heavy losses. Reports from the field indicate that Russia's human and equipment losses on this front have now far exceeded sustainable levels. However, for Ukraine, this is not just a statistic, it is an irreversible struggle for existence to protect their homes, streets, and families. We can state this unequivocally: Ukraine has no intention of abandoning the Donetsk Line. On the contrary, every attack and every successful defensive maneuver reinforces the fact that this region is Ukraine's unshakable stronghold. Although the Russian army is attempting to flatten the area with intense bombardment, Ukraine's professional brigades are rising from the ruins, exacting a heavy price from the invading forces at every step. This is not merely a military operation. It is a nation's determination to determine its own destiny and refuse to bow to occupation. Right now, deep within Donetsk, amid the piles of rubble from which smoke rises, Ukraine's most elite units are finalizing their coordinates for the next counterattack. The heavy equipment losses and moral collapse Russia is experiencing is a precursor to the major breakthrough expected on the front line. If the Russians continue like this, they will face significant military, material, and psychological losses. The ongoing fierce clashes here, surrounded by Ukrainian forces, will continue at any moment. Ukrainian soldiers are continuing to exert serious pressure both from the air and on the ground. If this continues, the Russians will become vulnerable to defeat at any moment. For the Russian military command, Donetsk is no longer just a geographical target, it has become a massive personnel and equipment grinder. The Kremlin's "advance at all costs" order is paying a price on the ground. If the Russian army continues these devastating waves of attacks without making logistical and strategic changes, it will face not only material bankruptcy but also a psychological collapse that will take generations to repair. Every street and every industrial facility in Donetsk is riddled with the professional defense architecture of Ukrainian forces. The fighting here is not just a flash in the air, it is a meticulously planned, predetermined strategy of destruction. The Ukrainian armed forces are maintaining this encircling pressure with a hybrid warfare doctrine, both from the air and on the ground. In the air, Ukraine's drone armies monitor Russian supply routes and strongholds 24/7, paralyzing them with pinpoint strikes. On the ground, the West's high-tech artillery systems silently destroy Russian ammunition depots deep within the country. This dual pressure is pushing Russian troops into a state of constant vulnerability. It should not be forgotten that an army that runs out of ammunition will retreat, but an army whose morale has collapsed and which knows that a bomb could fall on it at any moment is doomed to disintegration. The Russians are being dragged to the brink of precisely this disintegration on the Donetsk front. From a strategic perspective, Ukraine's primary goal here is not merely to hold the line, but to completely deplete Russia's offensive capabilities. Ukrainian military intelligence is turning Russia's numerical superiority into a disadvantage by engaging the enemy in open areas and well-fortified city ruins. Large Russian groups become easy targets for Ukraine's precision-guided systems in narrow passages. This situation is depleting Russia's military reserves day by day. With every attempt at advancement, the Russian army is actually hastening its own demise. Because every professional soldier lost and every modernized tank stolen is a piece of Russia's military future. In conclusion, this unwavering resistance on the Donetsk front is not only a physical obstacle but also a show of will that thwarts the strategic calculations of the occupying forces. The technological superiority of Ukrainian soldiers, combined with their unshakable motivation to defend their own land, is increasingly cornering Russia's cumbersome military structure. This resistance rising from the ashes of Donetsk is poised to ignite the fuse of the great turning point that will determine the course of the war. For Russia, Donetsk is becoming a quagmire in which it is trapped, not a victory. On the other side of the front, signals of the great counteroffensive being prepared in the deep silence have already begun to emerge. To avoid missing these analyses where we keep our finger on the pulse of the war and share the most up-to-date and accurate information from the field, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Your support is our greatest strength in bringing the realities from the field to more people. See you in the next emergency analysis and with new footage from the front. Goodbye for now.